Hey, this is Shaun with the Go Tennis Podcast, powered by Signature Tennis. Check out our calendar of Metro Atlanta tennis events at letsgotennis.com. And if you're a fan of Bull Shark Sports, go to shop.letsgotennis.com and get yourself a hoodie or a hat. Today, this is Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hestley. Today, Coach Ben wants to talk about responsibility and parents. This one is for you. Ben, you ready to talk youth sports?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right, today Coach Ben wants to talk to the parents who are being bullied by their own children to carry the equipment. We see this at parks, outside of schools, and headed into and away from sporting events. So, Ben, I'm going to ask the tough question. Is this a lack of responsibility pandemic?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I don't know. I mean, it could grow to that. Hopefully, we can cut that off before it becomes too much of a problem.
A whole generation.
Yeah, exactly. We had the last week we talked about don't be that parent. Don't let your kid be that. Don't let your kid become that adult when they get older. And so this is what youth sports is all about. Is just not just raising kids, but raising responsible adults or raising kids to be responsible adults. So today might be more of a rant from me as I'm around the ballpark. Spring season is upon us. Around the tennis courts, just starting to see more and more people come out and more moms and dads carrying their bags for little Susie and little Johnny as the little kid sort of trots behind mom or dad as they're hustling to the field or the court. So maybe a little bit more of a rant today on my part because that's my number one pet peeve is parents carrying their bags for their kids. But it is what it is, and it's something that we just cannot do if we're going to teach these kids any responsibility.
All right, so should I just sit back and let you rant for a second, or
You could
was that
soapbox it.
your
We could.
introduction to rant, or is
Yeah,
that the
that's the
holding
intro.
back?
Well, I mean, one thing a common phrase I use with my son is, "I'm your daddy, not your caddy."
Hmm. Okay.
And I think that pretty much, I mean, we don't have to stop the show now, but
Done. Yeah. See you
I
next
think
week.
I
Thanks
think
for
that
coming.
pretty much sums up everything that we're talking about, right? The mom or dad carrying the bag for the kid who says, "Hey, I don't have water today. My mom didn't bring my water, or my water's in the car, whatever. My dad has it. Okay, well, why does he have it? He's not
Mhm.
playing. You're playing. You get all your stuff."
And I feel like we've had this conversation before. I'm sure it's come up, and I apologize if I'm going to tell this same story, but I have this picture in my head, and I remember a little bit being kind of like this kid. But I remember one of my first tournaments as a teenager, there was this 10-year-old, and I'm going to use the phrase badass, and I apologize if I shouldn't for my language there,
It's an
but
adult
this
show. I mean, a
this
clean show,
10-year-old,
but it's
exactly.
adult. Yeah,
This 10-year-old was badass. He had the big bag, like the 12
yeah.
racket bag on his back that was basically scraping the ground behind him, right? He's walking, he's got his bag, no parent around, and he, excuse me, walks up and checks in and says, "Hi, I'm little Johnny. I need to check in for my match." And I'm like, "Yes, that is what it's supposed to look like. That is responsibility. That is a kid carrying his own stuff, checking himself in." And I'm sure my wife would be looking around going, "Where's his mom?" Like trying to say, "Well, this kid should have a parent around." And I'm like, "No, he's taking responsibility. He's checking in like a man." And I remember that just so clearly. It's one of my favorite stories, and I probably tell it too often. But that's what I would like to see more of, and I think that's where you're going with this.
Yeah, totally. That reminds me of when I used to run a bunch of tennis tournaments, and I would never let or always made the kids check in. Now, the parent could be with the child, but I always made the kid check in for their match. And for those of you who aren't familiar, if we have any listeners aren't familiar, when you play a tennis tournament, there's a check-in desk, or we call it a tournament desk, and you have to go to that. You have a match time, but we want to make sure everybody's there for their match. So you go and check in for your match, and then just patiently wait near the desk. And when the court you're assigned is open, we send you out. So that's general the process. So, but I have many times a mom comes up or dad comes up and like, "Hey, I'm here. It's for Shaun Boyce, 14U." I'm like, well, you don't look 14, and you sure don't look like Sean Boyce. Like, oh, he's waiting, he's in the car. I'm like, well, get him out of the car, tell him to come in. It's time for his match. And so I would make the kids check in for their match, and then patiently wait by the desk. That's part of the job. It's part of the role of being a tennis player, learning how to be a competitor, learning how to prepare. And we talked about this before, but how to manage competition, right? Just how to work through there's a process to this, and you are a part of that process. You are the main part of that process as the player, and you need to learn how that process works.
And if we zoom out to include a bunch of other sports, I remember showing up to basketball games, let's say specifically in this case, even practice, that's fine. It wasn't a thing where I was carrying my basketball and I had my equipment bag. It was a bit different experience because you showed up and all of the equipment was already there in the gym. But even when you showed up for a game, you had to walk in and go find your team. Now in baseball, walk us through a game scenario, because what do we see all the time? The kids running down and mom or dad has the backpack on their shoulder, and then the kid gets all the way down there and has to run all the way back up, like, oh, my mom's carrying my stuff. And then they get down and my mom forgot my water bottle. I'm like, no, no,
Yeah.
whose water bottle is it? Your water bottle, your responsibility.
Well, it usually starts at home, and the parent is, they're running late. They can't find his baseball belt or his baseball socks, or his cleats are muddy from the last practice. So they're outside and they're cold now because it was cold last night. Now I got there's a lot of sort of domestic issues that can happen and sort of derail your kid from getting to his game on time.
Uh-huh.
But typically, how a baseball or softball game works is you're supposed to arrive in 45 minutes to an hour before the game starts. And then the team goes through some sort of warm up procedure, right? We talked about dynamic warm up before, but maybe it's you hit balls in the cage, there's a throw, you go on the field. So most of the time they kind of try to schedule the games where they're about a half hour ish gap in between. And so the first part of your hour that you're there before the game is you hit in the cage, you get some batting practice, get a little dynamic warm up. Then you go on the field and do your throwing warm up, and coach hits some grounders and some fly balls to the kids, and that's kind of how they warm up for the game. But what happens a lot of time, baseball, you do have a lot of equipment, right?
Mhm.
To play baseball. It's not like basketball where you just roll in with your shoes on, maybe a little one of those little drawstring bags that my kids use, and have
Mhm.
their water bottle and their basketball shoes or their slides or Crocs in them or whatever. A lot more equipment to carry in baseball or softball. And I think that's sometimes why it does lend itself to see mom or dad carrying that big bag. There is a lot of equipment, and you are a small child, but it is their responsibility. And we want to move them in a direction to take ownership of their sport. So for starters, find a bag maybe that you can put everything in that they can still carry. The backpack bags in baseball and softball become more popular. When I played, we had the giant, like almost like
Duffel.
duffel bag type,
Yep.
because you need something long enough to put your bat in, and then all your gloves and equipment and stuff.
Yep.
So that was my day. Now they've switched to more backpacks, and everything's more functional and effective and efficient. So use that and have the kid be able to just carry his or her own backpack into there. But I think that's what for starters, what lends itself to parents carrying their bag is there is a lot of equipment, right?
Yeah, and I remember walking up to my soccer games, and we all had those little plastic flip flop sandal things that you'd wear, because
Yeah,
whether your cleats were dirty or whatever, you'd have them in a little Kroger plastic bag because they were dirty and your mom didn't want them in the house. And we'd show up, and so you'd be carrying that, and you'd have your water bottle, but you'd be in these sandals, so your socks would get wet in the grass anyway, and then you'd have to get there and put it on, and everybody's kind of putting on their stuff late, and depending on what age you are, you're not really great at tying your shoes, so the coach is usually helping kids tie their shoes as they're getting out there for warm up and everything. So there's a way for parents to create responsibility without just saying figure it out, kid. And in that case, also helping them learn and say, hey, if you need help with something, ask, but we're going to hand this to you, and you're going to go down there and you're going to say, hi, coach, I'm here. So you don't have to have every kid walk down holding mom's hand as they show up to a game or a match or whatever's
yeah.
going on.
Right, and it's all well intentioned, right? The parents super well intentioned, and we're parents ourselves. I know how these days go, and it's a lot easier. And then the parents, like short term mind, it's a lot easier just to grab Johnny's stuff and take it for him than it and him run down because of running late. Usually it's a running late case.
Hmm.
Just run on down. I was like, why are you running? Why are you running to the cage? You have nothing. Like,
What are you gonna
well,
do when you
where's your
get there?
stuff? Like, what advantage are you gaining? And I'll
What's your
tell you,
plan?
I'll say it just like that. How are you going to even play? You don't even have anything. Mom's carrying it. So why are you running down here? There's no
They
reason to
get
run down here if you have
they
nothing
get
to
in
do anything
line.
with.
They get in
Yeah,
line, and then they realize they get all the way out, and they're like, I don't have my baseball bat, or I don't have my tennis. Then they have to get
yeah,
out of line. Now they're frustrated. Now they want to get back in line where they were, and now they're cutting in line, and the other
yeah.
kids are upset.
Oh man, it's insane. I mean, I've had teams where it gets so bad sometimes where I'm like about the whole line thing. I'm like, look, I'm gonna actually just give you all a number, and this is your number, right? And you, this is when you're gonna, and this is when you're
Uh-huh.
gonna come in the cage with me, and I don't care what the line. I'll tell you, I don't care what the line looks like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna roll in who I want to roll in and make sure everybody gets a chance to hit. But I don't want to digress from this conversation. But it's that's usually what happens,
Yeah.
and it's just teaching the kids that this is your stuff.
Yeah.
And again, in the short term, it helps the parent just get the kid there faster,
Mhm.
right? It's like packing their bag for them at school in the morning. Yes, you're going to get to this bus sooner. You're going to get to school on time because mom or dad packed your bag for you today.
Mhm.
But in the long term, what's the effect? What's the side effect of that?
They don't know how to pack their own bag.
Right? Yeah, and this could just kind of continue to go on if you're not careful and end up to where they're relying too much on the parent to to get their stuff for them, to bring their stuff for them, and that's and then we're parents. We're going to have to help our kids in some way, but the main thing is to teach them how to do some of this stuff themselves. It's just like it's kind of like in coaching. I think about like asking players questions versus just spitting out and telling them information.
Mhm.
And we call it the push versus pull effect. Excuse me. So if I'm just pushing information at you, that's an easier approach because I'm just telling you what you need to do and expect you to do it right then. But the better long term development approach is to ask more questions and draw thought and feedback from the player on how they felt, what they think they're doing right or wrong, and if they can recreate that.
And I don't expect every coach to be like Socrates, but the Socratic method helps. And if you have the time and the patience to be able to ask a question instead of simply handing out the answer, let the child figure out what the answer is, then they have the responsibility of understanding it. You know they understand it. How many ducks are in this picture, child? Okay. As opposed to just, do you see the four ducks? And I get it. There's a certain time when we have time for things. Every once in a while, you're running late, you got to tie the kid's shoe.
Yeah.
But are you running late every day? The kid's never going to learn how to tie their shoe? And we've talked about the parent that just can't quite get it together and they always seem to be running late. And we get all that, but at some level, slow down for a second and let your kid try. Let your kid try to tie their own shoe and pack their own bag. We're very strict about it. My wife especially very strict about it. This is Giovanni's bag. You take care of it. Our 2-year-old comes home, takes off his shoes and puts them where they go, takes off his jacket and hangs it up, takes off his backpack, hangs it up, because this is yours. This is your responsibility. Now, we'll see what happens when he's 7, but right now, he's pretty good about taking responsibility for his own stuff.
Yeah, and I think let them fail. Look, man, they might forget their cleats one day. They might forget their water bottle. We can handle that. In the most cases, I always tell parents that that's the most important piece of equipment you can bring is your water bottle because oftentimes I'll have an extra racket. I'll have a bat or somebody they can borrow a bat from somebody, but I'm not getting an extra glove. But I'm not going to have extra water bottles or extra water for people. But I do say that's the most important piece of equipment, and it likely is. But hey, man, if they forget their bat that day, it's not the big deal. It's not the end
Right.
of the world, right? If they forget their batting gloves, it's not the end of the world, and maybe they'll learn from it. Maybe if they forget something, we'll deal with it for that day, but then they'll learn like, hey, look, okay, maybe I
Remember
need
what
to
happened the day you
remember and be more
forgot your? Yeah,
responsible and double check before we leave the house that all my stuff is intact.
exactly. I like it. All right, wrap it up for me. Do you need more ranting? Do you think you got it
I
out?
don't think I think I'm done ranting today. Be their daddy or their mommy, not their caddy is the biggest thing. Okay, let them carry their own stuff. They'll love it. They really will. Kids love structure. They love or they crave organization. They really do. As crazy as some of our kids are, they really like structure and organization. That's why they ask you all the time what's going to happen next. So let them live in that. Let them, you may have to help them pack snacks. You may have to help them fill their water bottle, but when they get out of the car, cleats or shoes are on, bag is on their back, and they are taking ownership to the field or court.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
That's all
Ben
I got.
Hesley. This has been Youth Sports Talk. We'll see you again next week. Thanks.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.